welcome to my 2025 Quarter 1 book review. During January, February, and March, I read 4 books. The first book I finished in 2025 was called Legacy of Shadows by Tessa Hale. It is the first installment of the trilogy called Supernaturals of Castle Academy. This was a free Amazon Prime book, and it was definitely free for a reason. The book follows 17-year-old Leighton Carmichael. In the prologue, we learn that Leighton hasn't seen her best friend Colt since her father's funeral when the two of them were 9 years old. Since then, Leighton's life has been very tragic. Her mom moved them all across the country and has been openly abusive to her. In fact, Leighton laments about being covered in bruises from her mom and her mom's boyfriend. At the start of the book, her main goal is to save up money by working at a diner so that she can move out of her mom's house when she turns 18. I'm using mom's house very liberally here. She actually lives in the garage, and it is essentially a storage unit that her mom has filled with all of her trash. As Leighton puts it, I'd made a home amongst the trash. It was fitting, given that's all she thought I was. One day, Colt, Leighton's best friend who she hasn't seen in 8 years, shows up at her garage, and he tells her that he has been stalking her for about a week and has concluded that she is unhappy enough where he needs to intervene, and invites her to come live at his family estate with him and some of his friends. This reunion between Leighton and Colt should have been really emotional. Like, she, so far in the book, has just been talking about how heartbroken she is about not seeing Colt ever again. But when she finally does see him, her reaction is bizarrely muted. Despite her internal monologue saying that she's so excited to see Colt, she stays sitting on her bed for almost the entire conversation, just like calmly petting her cat. There are no hugs, no tears, there's nothing. And then when Leighton agrees to leave, there's no excitement or even thoughts about escaping this abusive home she's found herself in. In fact, she's just sort of concerned about if her mom will let her move out, which is valid, but she's not even like, ooh, I can finally leave my mom's awful garage that I've been living in. Colt ends up taking Leighton to his family's estate, where he lives with 3 other guys and a butler, but again, there's no strong emotional reaction from Leighton, and she just feels like almost a very dull character because she's not expressing any emotions, it seems. Issues with the plot and pacing. My biggest problem by far with the book is how long Leighton is left in the dark about things. In contrast to Leighton's emotionlessness, mundane events provoke really over the top reactions from other characters. For example, a bully threatens Leighton and Colt at the mall, and this prompts Colt to usher Leighton out the back door of whatever store they're in and call a full security detail to drive them home. And no one is explaining anything to her or us, the readers. So it's just kind of frustrating that everybody's acting really weird about normal events. Like, people get bullied in malls sometimes, but usually I don't call my family's private security detail to drive me home. The pacing was also super inconsistent. Some scenes dragged on with unnecessary descriptions, while others felt really rushed. Like when Leighton finds a stray dog in her yard, she immediately takes pictures and then runs upstairs, makes missing posters, prints them, and runs back downstairs. And in that time, the other characters are like, oh, we found the owner of the dog, it's fine. So it felt like a weird, rushed moment of her panically making these missing posters. It was very strange. The supernatural elements were also poorly introduced, in my opinion. This book is part of a trilogy called Supernaturals of Castle Academy, and it took them so long to really acknowledge that there was anything supernatural going on. The author waited until page 178 to reveal that vampires exist in this universe, and then the other characters gaslit Leighton into believing otherwise. And this works somehow. She just believes them despite being attacked by a vampire a couple pages prior. But they're just like, oh, you had too much to drink, dude. You don't know what you're talking about. Then on page 216, we find out that 2 of the other main characters are dragon shapeshifters. And that actually made me just close my Kindle and stop reading for a bit over the pure absurdity of keeping that hidden. for 216 pages, and also dragon shapeshifters. The other characters are like a dog. Like, where did the dragons come from? I feel like dogs are more normal to shapeshift into. Finally, in chapter 49, which is page 223, Layton learns most of the truth about the supernatural world and her own heritage, but they're still leaving a lot of things out very clearly. I think this conversation needed to happen much earlier, certainly not in chapter 49, because the secrecy and keeping Layton away from everything just led to frustrating moments where Layton bumbles into danger unnecessarily. Problems with Layton's characterization. Layton's personality felt pretty inconsistent throughout the book. Early on, she emphasizes her desire to remain invisible, which stems from years of abuse where attention meant getting hurt. She avoids all friendships, aside from her elderly coworker Betsy. Yet, the author gives her these really random, quippy moments and lines where she very confidently talks back to people, and this feels really out of character for someone who has been so desperate to stay unnoticed for so long. Similarly, she's strangely okay with socialization and physical touch for someone who hasn't had a friend in 8 years. Layton is also always tiptoeing around and is written to be hyper aware of all of her surroundings, but people are constantly sneaking up on her. It's almost a little silly how often she's like going around sneaking, but then somebody sneaks up on her. The author also tries to get Layton to appear smart by having her notice strange things that are happening around her, like people's eye color changing randomly throughout the conversation she's having with them. But I feel like it falls short because she doesn't ever question the strange things that she's seeing. Or when she does, she very quickly drops it as soon as anybody has any sort of pushback on her. So this leaves both her and I with a ton of unanswered questions, but she won't ask them, and it's really frustrating to read. Annoying writing choices. Several elements of this book made it feel more like a fan fiction and less like a published novel. For instance, every male character, even the ones that she doesn't have a romantic storyline with, immediately adopts a touch her and die mentality towards her, and almost all of them give her a unique nickname, like Lily, Little Bird, Firecracker. These are so annoying to read over and over again. Speaking of reading things over and over again, the writing itself was super repetitive. The author seemed to latch on to certain phrases and then overuse them before moving on. For example, some of the phrases the author repeated were a million things, worried the corner of my lip. She also had this character Trace leave the room after saying it was all a huge mistake over and over again. The series named Bars, come here. Barcy. Bars. Hi. Can I sneeze? He licked the microphone. Okay, be good. Good boy. Even the name of the trilogy, Supernaturals of Castle Academy, felt like a confusing, misleading choice. The school itself isn't even introduced until page 89, which is 32% of the way into the book, and no one calls it Castle Academy. They all refer to it as Castle Prep. Another confusing thing is the title of the book, Legacy of Shadows. I don't know what the shadows are. Towards the end of the book, we kind of figure out what the legacy is referring to, but it's certainly not of shadows. I don't know where the shadows is coming in. The supporting cast is the worst. The supporting characters are frustratingly one-dimensional, as if they're all stuck in a stick to the status quo loop from High School Musical. But the worst offense? When Layton is attacked by a vampire, but as you guys recall, she doesn't know that it's a vampire because everyone gaslights her into believing she just had too much to drink and was hallucinating the whole attack. None of the supporting characters will let her go to the police. Instead, they manipulate her into staying quiet, claiming that going to the police could complicate the custody situation with her abusive mom, and it would make things worse. The almost threat of involving Layton's mom gets her to comply with almost everything that they say. This manipulation is so infuriating to read because, as the reader, we know that Leighton's mom used to use the same excuse to keep Leighton from reporting her own abuse. It was so cruel of these characters to use this threat when they know her mom used it against her. What's even more horrifying is later in the book, the supporting characters admit that they have always known about the abuse that Leighton has gone through. They essentially just left her to deal with all of that because she wasn't useful to them yet. It is absolutely heartless and it undermines any sense of moral high ground that they try to claim. Bright spots in the book. To be fair, there were a few redeeming moments. Leighton's tendency to just walk out of any uncomfortable situation was surprisingly relatable, and it was a highlight in her otherwise frustrating character. There were also two pleasant characters in the whole book. Betsy, Leighton's previously mentioned elderly coworker. I liked her because she kind of looked out for Leighton and would give her free meals at the diner they worked at. The other good character was Baldwin, who is the butler at Colt's family estate. He helps Leighton settle in and sets up her room for her and makes sure that her cat is well taken care of. And he ensures that she just has everything she needs and he never treats her poorly. I think the reason I liked Betsy and Baldwin so much was that both of them helped Leighton out of the goodness of their hearts and seemed to be the only characters with no ulterior motives. The best part of the book, though, was that it was a really quick read, so I didn't feel stuck in a sunk cost fallacy for too long. Final thoughts. Legacy of Shadows had potential, but the plot dragged, the characters were frustrating, and the writing felt amateurish. The few bright spots, mainly Betsy and Baldwin, were not enough to salvage the book. Ultimately, it kind of just felt like a fan fiction that never quite was able to find its footing, and the free price tag made a lot of sense. I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. Hop up! Yay, Mercy Boy! Can I sneeze? Mwah! Good boy. Okay. Bye, buddy. Everyone, please comment, "Oh my gosh, Erin, I love your shirt so much. Where did you get it?" So that I can go, "Thank you, I made it." Rebecca Hanover's The Similars was the second book that I read this year, and I loved it so much I've already picked up the sequel, The Pretenders. The story follows Emma Chance, who is a student at an elite boarding school called Darkwood Academy. We get to know Emma's character pretty well with the opening line of the book, "I don't actively want to die, not all the time." We quickly learn that Emma is dealing with a personal trauma. Her best friend Oliver recently died via self, and she was the one to have found him. In the opening of the book, Emma is trying to not think too hard about how her life is going to change and what the upcoming school year is going to be like without her best friend, and instead she is trying to focus on the 6 mysterious new students that are set to arrive to the academy. These 6 students end up being a horrible distraction for her. Much to everyone's shock, the new group of students are actually illegally created clones made of existing students. The clone group calls themselves the Similars, hence the title of the book. The reason this group of clones is not a good distraction for Emma is because one of the Similars, Levi, is actually a clone of Oliver, her dead best friend. She lashes out at Levi in anger because she is unable to process the grief and confusion of seeing this person who is basically wearing her dead best friend's face. I found this twin twist to be so incredibly sad. Like Emma, I was initially angry at Levi for just simply existing. She even ends up getting into a physical altercation with him and makes a huge scene that the whole school sees. Even though this was unfair to Levi, I found myself really rooting for Emma in this moment. I also wanted Levi to just be gone from the school and not be a heartbreaking reminder of Oliver. I think the author did a really fantastic job of putting the reader in Emma's headspace. The ethics of cloning. What made this novel particularly interesting was its near future setting, where the world was still recognizably our own, but had significant tech advancements, especially in cloning. One of the strongest aspects of this book was how it made the reader consider ethical dilemmas surrounding the cloning topic. With the introduction of the Similars, Darkwood Academy became a battleground for these debates to take place. Some students took the stance of anti-clone and made sure that the clones felt unwelcome and unwanted, while other students were more neutral and were just really curious about them. The clones themselves were created illegally, but this was through no fault of their own. Should they be granted full rights as if they were a regular human? And what about the DNA donors whose genetic material was taken without their consent? Are they owed reparations? The questions of cloning ethics lingered in my mind long after I put this book down, which is a true testament to how immersive and thought-provoking the world in The Similars is. Mysteries abound. Beyond the sci-fi elements, The Similars was a compelling mystery. Oliver's death looms over Emma, filling her with a ton of guilt. We find out that Emma and Oliver had been friends for years, but he confessed to her that he was actually in love with her, and she turned him down. After this rejection, he became more distanced from her, and she gave him his space. Weeks later, she went to check in on him and found him deceased in his bed. Emma can't shake the feeling that her rejection played a role in his death, and seeing Levi only intensifies these feelings of grief for her. But a key arrives in the mail, and it's sent from Oliver before he died. This makes Emma question everything. Was his death truly self-inflicted, or is there something bigger at play? As Emma tries to find out the truth about Oliver's death, another mystery unfolds. Her other best friend and roommate, Prue, is mysteriously injured and has to be rushed to the hospital. Once there, Emma is completely blocked from contacting her. Prue, like Oliver, was one of the students whose DNA was stolen to create a clone. Suspicion spreads throughout the school. Did the Similars have something to do with Prue's injuries? Are they eliminating their originals? Or is something else happening? Then there are the Similars themselves. Emma keeps finding herself in the perfect position to spy on them, which she does take the opportunity to do, and what she discovers really confuses her. The Similars don't behave like other clones. They possess unnatural abilities, like holding their breath for impossible amounts of time, or jumping to inhuman heights. She also catches them whispering about secret tasks that they've been assigned. This leaves her confused on what exactly were the Similars created for? Everyone has been led to believe that the Similars were created by accident, but the mention of these tasks makes Emma think that there is something nefarious going on. It leads her to believe that the Similars are following someone's orders, and she is determined to figure out whose orders they are and for what purpose. The 10. As if things weren't complicated enough in this world of cloning, Darkwood Academy also has its own elite hierarchy, which is an exclusive school-sanctioned society called the 10. Membership to the 10 is given to the top 10 performing juniors and seniors at the school. The 10 functions as the school's own shadow government. They control the school's social order, and they enforce hazing rituals that border on cruelty. Emma, of course, is indicted into the 10, along with several of the Similars. Unfortunately, the rest of the 10 is comprised of students who are very openly anti-clone and see the Similars as abominations rather than equals. This places her into the middle of an escalating conflict and complicates her investigations into those previously mentioned mysteries. The Similars are subjected to almost constant scrutiny, suspicion, and humiliation, and Emma's association with them puts her under the microscope as well. This does help to establish Emma as one of the Similars' true allies. And after Prue is taken from the school, they become Emma's core friend group. Because of this friendship, Emma is able to ask the Similars for help answering some of those mysteries that she's trying to solve. Romance or red flag? The only part of the book I really did not like was Emma developing romantic feelings for Levi. Given that he is a clone of her dead best friend, I thought that she would be too freaked out to even consider that a possibility. The two start out with an obviously hostile relationship. As I said, Emma physically assaults Levi the first time that they meet over the unprocessed grief she has over Oliver's death. The turning point comes when Prue is injured and Levi is the one that rushes to get her help. This display of selflessness shifts Emma's perspective of him and gradually improves their relationship. I do not think that Emma's feelings towards Levi are entirely real. I think that her loss of Oliver was impacting how she viewed Levi. seeing him almost as a fresh start or a second chance she never got with Oliver. Emma makes very clear that she never regretted rejecting Oliver romantically because she never saw him that way, but she does regret how things were left between them. Her feelings for Levi blur the line between grief and genuine connection, which makes their relationship complex and a little unsettling. Final thoughts. I don't want to spoil the book too much because I really enjoyed it and I really want people to go read it. I will just say that a lot of craziness is revealed and I can't wait to read the sequel. Overall, I think The Similars successfully combined dystopian and mystery. While the romance between Emma and Levi was a little odd for me, the ethical dilemmas and the suspense definitely kept me hooked.
Can we play something a little more upbeat?
The third book I read this year, and spoiler alert, my favorite book I've read so far, is Hearts That Cut by Kika Hatzopoulou. This is the sequel to the book I read last year, Threads That Bind, and it continues the journey of Io, who is a descendant of the Greek fates. Also, please do not come for me if I am pronouncing Io's name wrong. In the audiobooks, the narrator, Mia Hutchinson Shaw, pronounced her name Io, but I know that sometimes it is pronounced Io. I will be going with Io because that is what I am used to. I am sorry if I'm wrong. Also, shout out to Mia Hutchinson Shaw. She was a phenomenal narrator, and I look forward to listening to more books that she narrates. Threads That Bind recap. So, let me catch you up if you didn't read Threads That Bind. This story takes place in a world where gods of myth once ruled, but they have since died out, and their descendants are left with fractions of their powers. Io is the youngest of the three Aura sisters, and she is also a Moray born, which means that she is a descendant of the Greek fates. As the youngest, she is what's known as a cutter, meaning that she can cut the threads that bind people to things that they love or even to life itself. Her older sisters also possess powers. Thais, the eldest, is what's known as a weaver, meaning she can create new threads, and the middle sister, Ava, is a drawer, meaning she can elongate or shorten threads, and this directly relates to how strong the emotions are tied to them. Because of her ability to see the threads that connect people to the things they love, Io works as a private detective, and most commonly she is employed to catch cheaters having affairs. During one of these cases, Io runs into something she has never seen before. Something far more dangerous than a cheater. A person whose life thread is severed but is still walking around. She calls this person a wraith, and she watches one murder the subject of her investigation. This leads her to Ede Runa, a man with whom she shares a fate thread. A fate thread means that two people are bound together, and that their destinies are intertwined. This wraith really freaks Io out, so she goes on to investigate and finds out that there's more than just the one wraith. There's actually a lot of them, and they are kidnapped women whose life and love threads have been cut. They use these now severed threads as a whip, and they use it to kill people that they deem guilty of a crime. In trying to stop these wraiths, Io teams up with Ede, who she finds out is the second in command of Bianca, who is the mob queen. Io also attempts to get help from the Nine, who are the descendants of the Greek muses. However, the Nine reject her, fearing a prophecy that warns she will bring about the end of the world. The Cutter, the unseen blade, the reaper of fates. She watches silver like a sign, she weeps silver like a mourning song, she holds silver like a blade. She cuts the thread, and the world ends. Obviously, with this prophecy, the Nine don't help her, but instead want to stop her. The case turns personal when Io discovers that her eldest sister Thais is likely involved with the creation of these wraiths. And the wraiths seem to be connected to the Moonset Riots, which is a war that happened 13 years ago in Io's home city of Alante, where all known descendants of the Furies were massacred. At the end of Threads That Bind, a series of crazy events happen. Bianca, the mob queen, ends up transforming into a wraith, and in her rage kills almost all of the Nine. During this slaughter, Ede is critically injured. Io realizes that Bianca isn't totally to blame for what happened. Thais has actually been helping to orchestrate the kidnappings, transformations, and murders. When Io is able to confront Thais, her sister reveals a shocking truth. The gods are alive, and she is in fact helping them. The final betrayal comes when Io's middle sister, Ava, actually sides with Thais. The two elder Aura sisters end up fleeing Alante to escape punishment, leaving Io alone. But before they're able to get away, Io is able to grab hold of the golden thread that connects Thais to the god she's serving. She and Bianca form an uneasy alliance to use this golden thread to track down the god. Ede, unfortunately, is unable to come with them due to his injuries. He promises Io that he will find her again. He says that he can use the fate thread that connects them to guide him to her. On to Hearts That Cut. In the opening of Hearts That Cut, Io and Bianca are in the Wastelands, and they are using this golden thread to track down the god. But instead of finding the god, they discover Hane, who is another person that was working with Thais and the gods. Hane had tied the golden thread to herself in order to interrupt Io's search. Hane, Io, Bianca, and some other people get into a fight and Hane gets away. So Io decides to start tracking Hane instead of the gods. Along the way, Io discovers a pattern of sibling disappearances throughout the Wastelands. And these disappearances seem connected to the murders that were happening in Alante. Meanwhile, her fate thread that she shares with Ede starts slowly deteriorating. This leaves Io to question their bonds and their relationship. The Aura Sisters. The exploration of Io's relationship with her sisters was super interesting to me. Their parents died when they were young, meaning that the sisters almost had to raise each other, leading to a confusing dynamic of love and resentment. Throughout the book, Io questions the roles they were forced into as children, with Thais as the leader, Ava as the peacekeeper, and Io as the follower. Thais, as the leader, tries to exert a powerful, almost suffocating influence over Io, while Io just wants peace between them. She talks about when they were younger, she would have to walk on eggshells around Thais because of her unpredictable and extreme moods. Before Threads That Bind, Thais actually ran away from home, and Io is carrying a lot of guilt over this, feeling like she is the one that pushed Thais away. But throughout the duology, Io starts to understand that Thais' actions were not her responsibility. I found Thais herself to be a really interesting character. In both books, she clings to this idea of being a savior. She is desperate for a righteous cause and will often blind herself from the moral consequences of her choices. In the past, Thais used her causes to manipulate Io's emotions and exploit her cutting abilities, often pushing her into dangerous situations under the guise of doing what is necessary. The problem with Thais is that she truly believes whatever she's doing is the right thing to do. She genuinely believed that the kidnapping and essentially killing of people to turn them into wraiths was the only good choice. You want to sneeze? Hi. Pars, how are you doing today?
Very confused at all times.
Ah! A big chunk of Io's growth as a character is rejecting Thais' control over her and also accepting that the sisterly love that they once shared has been warped by Thais' devotion to a cause that Io just can't support. Io's relationship with her middle sister Ava is a little more ambiguous. Ava is not outwardly manipulative like Thais, but her complicity makes the betrayal more painful. Ava was always the mediator between the sisters, making her ultimate decision to side with Thais all the more devastating for Io. This choice is not born out of hatred for Io, but instead out of wanting to be a good sister, which makes it all feel very real and human. I loved the complicatedness of the relationships between the Aura sisters. Although the stakes might be heightened by magic and myth, it all felt very realistic. The burden of choice and fate. The fate thread that binds Io and Ede together constantly forces Io to question whether she should accept or deny her fate. A fate thread means that two people are bound together and that their destinies are intertwined. As I said before, Io is a cutter. She holds all the power to sever this connection between her and Ede. Since they were children, Thais has always encouraged Io to cut the thread. If she did, she'd be giving both herself and Ede the freedom to choose their own futures. But Io hesitates. She does this because her whole life this thread has been a symbol that she will be loved by someone one day. Without it, she wonders if she's someone who's even capable of love or if she deserves it. Ede manages to find Io in Hearts That Cut. During the book, they discuss the fate thread at length. Ede urges her to cut the thread and promises that his feelings towards her won't change. He wants to have a love that isn't tied to fate, but is instead freely given. But he also respects her choice not to cut it. This constant push and pull makes Io question if love is more meaningful when it's freely given or when it's written in the stars. In my 2024 book review, I talked about how much I hated the fated love trope, but in this book, I actually really liked it. Io's ability to sever this bond and not being able to bring herself to do it was really interesting to read. Whenever she's considering cutting it, she just thinks about her deepest desires. To be seen, to be wanted, and to have someone who's truly hers. I will not spoil what happens. I will encourage you to read this book. Does Io cut it? Does she not? What happens between her and Ede? Will he resent her for not cutting it? Will he leave her if she does? Who's to say? Final thoughts. Hearts That Cut was such a beautiful novel. The characters became so dear to me, and I loved all of their journeys. I don't want to spoil it too much, so I'm going to just leave it at this book was amazing and I loved it. I actually teared up while reading the ending. The only thing I will say is that all of the prophecies come true in some way. Obviously, I had to give this book 5 stars. Hello, intro Erin again. My final book of the quarter was Wings of Starlight by Allison Saft. This book was unfortunately disappointing. I wanted to like it so bad. I love the Tinkerbell movies, and I was so excited to finally learn the backstory of Queen Clarion and Lord Mallory that was briefly touched upon in Secret of the Wings. However, the execution of this book left me frustrated. If you're unfamiliar with the Tinkerbell movies, let me set the stage for you. This story entirely takes place at Pixie Hollow, which is a small island in Neverland from Peter Pan. This island is split into 4 quadrants, and there is one for each season. Also, this takes place some unspecified amount of time before the Tinkerbell movies. It's either like hundreds or thousands of years. Our main character is Queen Clarion from the Tinkerbell movies, but it is while she is still Princess Clarion, and she is getting ready for her coronation, but she feels like she is going to be a disappointment to everyone. The reason she feels like she'll be such a disappointment to everyone is that she's super different from the current queen, Queen Elvina. Elvina is really imposing and regal, and Clarion wants to be more friendly and approachable to all of the citizens of Pixie Hollow. During the time leading up to Clarion's coronation, attacks begin. Strange creatures appear and they spew acid that kills all vegetation and leaves fairies trapped in a nightmare-filled slumber. Queen Elvina reveals that these creatures are called nightmares, and they are almost as old as Pixie Hollow itself. Up until now, they had been trapped in a frozen lake in the winter quadrant of Pixie Hollow. Fearing for Clarion's safety, Elvina forbids her from getting involved. Of course, Clarion really cares about her subjects, so she sneaks out anyways. She tracks the nightmares to the border of spring and winter, where she meets Mallory, who says he is the warden of the Winter Woods and is the one who was tasked with keeping the nightmares in the lake prison. Neither of the 2 fairies are able to cross into the other's season. His wings would melt in the heat, and her wings would freeze and break in the cold. There is also no known magic to repair a damaged wing, so this will be a permanent disability. Nonetheless, the 2 try to work together to stop the nightmares. Justified tragedy. If you have seen Secret of the Wings, you know how their love story ends. Because of their love, Mallory crosses into spring and his wings melt, and to keep others from repeating their poor mistakes, Clarion closes the border permanently. The movie frames it as a tragic yet naive mistake, one made for juvenile love. This is not exactly how it happens in the book. Yes, Mallory crosses the border because he loves Clarion, but it's not just for fun. He does it to save her life. He does it because she got injured in winter and would die without immediate attention. So he sacrifices his wings in order to bring her to safety. This situation makes his decision to cross into spring much more justified. And yet, despite this, the border closure still happens, but it makes less sense. Throughout the book, Clarion crosses into winter plenty of times, whether it's to hang out with Mallory, or to research the nightmares, or even attend the coronation ball that Winter threw for her. She's able to do this because her best friend Petra, who is a tinker fairy, makes a really nice coat for her. Something that somehow no one thought of before. But by the end of the book, because of the one incident of Mallory's wings melting, she bans crossing entirely. Not only does she ban crossing, but she also tells Mallory that they can never speak again except in a professional context, where he is the Lord of Winter and she is the Queen of Pixie Hollow. This extreme reaction just doesn't feel like something that the Clarion from the books would do. Clarion's inconsistent characterization. This leads me to my biggest issue, which is Clarion's characterization. I understand that the book's ending had to align with the movie, but this version of Clarion doesn't seem to be the same one from the film. In the book, she's reckless, she's putting her heart above the rules, and she's constantly sneaking out to do what she thinks is right. But by the end, she suddenly decides to enforce a rule that she herself would never have followed. I just found it a little hard to believe that a character who repeatedly defies authority would then impose such a strict, permanent law. The book just failed to justify this shift, making her actions feel forced to fit the movie's canon rather than true to her character. I could understand her having the impulse to make this law because she is still young, she's inexperienced, and Mallory is very dear to her. But choosing to make it permanent and last hundreds, if not thousands of years, doesn't make sense to me. This inconsistency made it very hard to connect with her character and made me question the logic of her character arc overall. I feel in my heart of hearts that the book Clarion would never have closed the border, and she would have never told Mallory that they could not speak unless in an official capacity. Unfair logic. Another frustrating aspect was the way the fairy world itself was structured. This was obviously not the author's fault. She was just basing it off of the Tinkerbell movies and Tinkerbell books, but it was something that was frustrating enough where I wanted to put it in this video. Fairies in this universe have talents. If you've seen the Tinkerbell movies, you're probably familiar with a couple of them, like Tinker, Animal, fast flying talents, that sort of thing. But this book introduced some of them that feel completely unfair. Clarion, for example, is a governing talent. This is a special talent that basically just means that she will be the next queen of Pixie Hollow, and she gets some magic abilities out of it. Which is great. Governing talent makes sense to be in a place of authority. But then there's other fairies with talents like dusting and serving. So, like, while some fairies can make flowers bloom on command, others are just really good at cleaning. That just feels so unjust. The inequalities extend to geography too. The warm fairies, which are spring, summer, and autumn, can move freely between their 3 seasons. But the winter fairies, they can't leave their season at all. The idea that the winter fairy wings would melt in any of the 3 other seasons, while the warm fairies can go wherever they please, feels arbitrary at best. Are we really supposed to believe that there's that much difference between a winter and an autumn fairy's wings? This imbalance makes the entire system feel unreasonable. The illusion of stakes. She's constantly under heavy guard and is forbidden from acting freely, but the consequence of disobedience is never really made clear. The worst that it seems will happen is that Queen Elvina would be disappointed, and Clarion's guard, Artemis, might lose her job. But even Artemis losing her job feels meaningless, because in a couple weeks when Clarion is queen, she could just reinstate her. This made the surrounding tension of her disobedience feel very hollow. Final thoughts. While there were some enjoyable moments, Wings of Starlight did not live up to my expectations. This had the potential to be a great prequel to the Tinkerbell movies, and it's one that a lot of fans have been waiting for a really long time, myself included. I really wanted to love this book, but in the end it just didn't click with me. I ended up giving it 3.75 stars. And thus concludes 2025 Quarter 1 book reviews. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you read some of the books. They were not all bad. Specifically, Hearts That Cut was my favorite. I would highly recommend reading that and Threads That Bind. But also, The Similars is pretty good, and the sequel, The Pretenders, so far is really good. I also am reading Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I actually went and got it opening night. I'm not that far through the book because I'm pacing myself because I want to maximize the length of time I can enjoy this for. It's kind of hard to see, but the book is actually having trouble closing because I have put so many notes. So far, I absolutely love this book. I look forward to being able to write some sort of review for it, although I imagine it's going to emotionally damage me too much to write anything meaningful. Feel free to add me on StoryGraph if you want to see my ratings in real time instead of waiting for the end of the quarter to get a video review. And on StoryGraph, you can also see how many books I try reading at one time. Right now, it is 10. My StoryGraph link will be down in the description. Over and out. I think that's it.